the real value of the cedi, it is between 10 Ghana cedis and 12 cedis per dollar. This is also coming shortly after he said that, or he rejected suggestions that perhaps the government could work harder at getting the cedi to $1, 1 Ghana cedis, because he said that would not be good for us. So what are the implications of the current appreciation of the Ghana cedi, and what are the real policies behind this appreciation and the overall health of the economy? Hello, good evening, and welcome to Agenda. My name is Beatrice, and tonight we want to go into the appreciation of the Ghana cedi against the US dollar and what this means for you, the ordinary person, and the businessman or woman, wherever you find yourself. I do have on the panel with me Sharif Mahmood Khalid. He is Associate Professor of Accounting and Finance and Economic Advisor to the Vice President. Good evening to you, Prof. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening.
I also have on my left side Professor Isaac Boedi. He's the Dean of the Faculty of Accounting and Finance at the UPSA. Prof, it's great to have you as well in studio.
Good to see you too.
Thank you for joining us. I have a video call with us, Dr. George Domfe. He's a development economist. Good evening to you, Doc. Thank you as well for joining us on Agenda tonight.
Good evening, my sister.
And last but not the least, we also do have with us Professor Daniel Kaufman. He is a former director at the World Bank and visiting scholar at Harvard. He joins us as well via video call. Prof, if you can hear us, good evening to you. Thank you for joining us as well.
Good evening.
Wonderful. I want to start with you, Associate Professor Khalid. And I just mentioned that indeed the president just a number of days ago said that the real value of the cedi should be pegged at between 10 Ghana cedis and 12 Ghana cedis. What's the science behind that pronouncement?
Well, I mean, it's in terms of real value, it's different to trading currencies, because when you're trading on the market, you've got black market rates, you've got interbank rates, among other issues. So in currency trading, more so in our part of the world, where it's seen as a business, in quotes, you'd realize that you wouldn't get the actual value of it on the market when it's being traded, because, you know, it passes through different intermediaries, among other issues. But the president is reporting based on the facts from his advisors to say, okay, well, in actual sense, this is what the value is. But in reality, based on, you know, the exposure to different intermediaries, the needs of it, among other issues, this is what we're having on the market.
Critics say that perhaps the president should have left it to the market instead of putting that cap on it.
Well, I mean, he's not put a cap on it. It's a conversation. I don't think it's a cap. If you look at the conversation that he was having, he would say, okay, well, in reality, right, if the market was to function, ceteris paribus, all things being equal, without any of these things happening, this is what we will have, based on the advice or expert report I have received. However, based on ABCD, where you have intermediaries, exigencies of the time, you know, sometimes even given that it's not our predominant currency, the need for it and the timing for it can actually even give you rates on a different level, as opposed to the interbank rates or the actual official rates. So this is invariably what the president was referring to.
Let me ask you this before I go to the other panel members for their preliminary thought as well, just establishing this fact. You do not think that this kind of backs that problem of people holding the dollar, because 10 and 12 is still quite high?
No, I rather think that it's an honest conversation that the president's opening up to say, okay, well, this is what it is, right? For speculators within the market, he's rather giving or throwing a, caution in the wind. Caveat emptor, buyers beware. This is what is happening, right, in reality. So everyone has their antennas on. So I thought that that was more of a responsible conversation rather than, exacerbating issues of, as it may, hoarding. So it rather allows people to have real thinking, real projection, because you'd see the president, the finance minister, and the central bank governor are looking more long-term than short-term, which is why such communication is very important, and the openness of it. Never in the history do we have a president this open about currency conversations. So if we're beginning to have that, we need to applaud it.
We need to applaud it. You say, I don't know what you think about it, Professor Boedi.
Yeah, good evening, B, and good evening, my good friend and the viewers as well. In this market, when we talk about currency trading, speculations are allowed. But sometimes you have to be careful how you speculate. We had a president who, last week or so, had come out to say that the cedi should be trading around this figure, I think 10 to
12 Ghana cedis, yes.
In fact, I can sit in my home and do same projections. It's allowed. Before the statement, I had done similar projections, and I got a similar value. But the challenge is when you start putting the information out there, because it's about planning. If you speculate, people benefit, others are also disadvantaged. So I would have loved to have allowed those in charge of the controls to have come out with such statements. In terms of openness of a presidency, I've seen one, trying as much as possible to let people know what is happening. But when it comes to controls, in terms of the monetary policies, and we have people who are in charge, and sometimes we leave those things for them to come out with such figures. If you want to speculate, if you want to do stimulations in terms of what the projection will be in the next 1 month, everyone is allowed to do that.
You think what the president said was speculation? What he did by saying that the real value is between 10 and 12 was speculation?
Yeah, I don't know the figures, the parameters that he used, but the point is that he made a statement. And once you start making a statement in forex markets, you have people who benefit and there's others who will be disadvantaged.
So
for instance,
in other words,
after that statement, you can go to market and check. Either people start holding the dollar or they start using the dollar.
What have you found?
From my analysis?
Yes.
I have not checked the trend over the period, but obviously there will be an impact when such pronouncements are made. Either people will find a way to hold the dollar, and when you do that, you see the reactions in the market.
So I just want to get clarity. Are you saying that you're aware that people are holding the dollars, or you haven't done your survey yet, so you cannot confirm?
I have not done my survey. I'm saying that in the worst case scenario, when you start making such pronouncements in the market, that's what happened some years ago when the minister was in Parliament saying that the cedi was going to go up. We felt the impact in the forex market.
And again, just before I go to Dr. George Domfe and Professor Kaufman as well, what you're also essentially saying is that, yes, Professor Khalid is saying that perhaps we have one of the most transparent and open presidents. You don't necessarily agree with that when it comes to this very subject.
I can give you similar pronouncement by other presidents before. So when you use the word, the most transparent government, it's difficult for me to. Yes, we've seen that in a few months ago, we have seen similar. But if you want us to give a chronology over a period, which government have been so transparent, we don't have the yardstick for me to judge at this point.
I want to come to you, Dr. George Domfe, your initial reaction to what has been said so far.
Thank you, my sir. Let me say very good evening to my colleague analysts and also our cherished viewers and listeners. I will start and say I disagree. I don't think I share opinion with Professor Boadi about the pronouncement from the president. The president is a politician. You know, he wasn't looking at it from economic perspective. He's a politician, and this is a president who had ruled Ghana before. Exactly on 7th January 2013, he became president, was sworn in president. $1 was going for 191 pesos. This Ghana bank exchange rate, exchange to be kind. $1 was going for 1 cedi 91 pesos. At the time he handed over to Akufo on 7th January 2017, that day $1 was exchanged for 4 cedis 21 pesos. And that is accumulative depreciation of 54.87%. If you look at since 1992, if you look at the performance of cedi under all governments, this is one of the worst that we saw. And so Ghanaians talked a lot about him, that he didn't do well. And then opposition said they would arrest them when they have opportunities. So they came to right, and we also they did very well with cedi.
So, Prof, forgive me, Dr. Domfe. I know you're trying to give us some history, but are you able to kindly address the question now and where we are currently moving forward?
No, I'm addressing the question. Yeah, so the question I'm addressing is that what the statement by the president is a political statement. And I'm saying that He has been a president before, and under him, cedi depreciated 54.87%. That was one of the worst performers under any government. And the government that after him, the affair of office, cedi depreciated 26.9%. They did well, but their second term depreciated 64%. We all know what happened recently. And so if today he has come and cedi is doing well, I don't think that we can blame him for coming out to tell me about what is happening. Yeah, I mean, he's a politician. And then let me, as an economist, I would have very cautious because Ghana is not like US and other countries practice a floating exchange rate system. Our regime manage exchange rate, and so periodically, Ghana intervene to support. Asked when the bank's intervention. Recently, April alone, Bank of Ghana supplied $480 million. They went on to supply $485 million in the month May, when demand for dollar is already going down. And so when you have set environment, definitely cedi will pick up, I mean, a higher performance. Do so well. cedi is doing today is artificial. It's completely artificial. For I will come out to Ghanaians that the real value is supposed to be between 10 and 12. We have seen this before.
Okay, so you're saying, I have to go to Dr. Domfe, forgive me. Forgive me. So I'm just taking your preliminary thought here. I will come back to you, perhaps for you to explain why you think the current appreciation of the cedi is artificial. I'm yet to get that information, as it were, from Professor Khalid as well regarding what exactly the government is doing. But let me get the initial reaction as well of Professor Daniel Kaufman, former director at the World Bank. Prof, I'm sure you've heard the comments from the three panelists, especially regarding the pronouncement made by the president that the real value of the cedi is between 10 and 12 Ghana cedis. I know you've advised a number of governments around the world. Can you tell us what your thought is around this?
Okay, first of all, I left the World Bank 17 years ago, so I don't speak for the World Bank, far from it, although I have a lot of respect for the institution. Second, I'm not an expert on Ghana like you all are, so with some humility, I try to bring an outside perspective, although I love your country and I've been many times there and I've done some work there. Having said that, I mean, there's nothing ultimately wrong from a president, politicians, and other officials of joining this conversation, as was said before, and putting these issues and signaling, also for signaling purposes in itself is okay. But the real issue from my experience everywhere else is if a message is being given about a particular range for the exchange rate, what are the measures for the not only short term, medium and longer term and commitment that is being implemented and will be implemented to back it all up. Let me just put for the discussion the following data point. I understand that right now, and I look a lot in the world at bond yields, because it tells you what investors think it's viable in terms of interest rates for the future. So the 6 months for Ghana is about, I don't know, 18, 19, 15%, 15% in that range. The 10-year one is almost double that. So it's one of the steepest inverted yield curves in the world. So the investors, the players in the market are still thinking that in the medium to long term, there's going to be still very significant risk of very high inflation. So the real question is how the confidence continues to be restored. And I know there has been progress over the past many months, and they say IMF program, but there have been 6, 7, how many IMF programs? And then it goes off the rail to be able then to chart a path forward, which is not just what's the exchange rate tomorrow or the month after, but what happens in 6 months, in a year, or in 3 years. And I would submit there that the monetary and fiscal policies the structural reforms that are needed and the governance reforms that are still needed, and that's not just about Ghana, that applies to has to be put in this mix and in this discussion. So politicians, when they speak about that, it's extremely important that they complement any assessment that they may have, and it's perfectly legitimate that the leaders give that assessment. Usually it's done by the governor or the president of the central bank and the minister of finance, but the president can do that, but has to be part of the discussion and the strategy on these other measures as well, and not just a discussion of elevator economics of the exact right rate of the exchange rate, which without context means nothing, because the market will tell you, it will tell you in a few weeks something different if these measures are not adopted, or there is no confidence in the markets about these structural measures and all the rest that needs to be in place.
And it's at this point I want to come back to you, Professor Khalid, because the first question I asked earlier was the science behind this. And I don't seem to have gotten any information from the other panel members that they really got that science behind the figure the president
before
gave.
I dovetail into that, let's not make it feel as though speculation is a negative terminology. Speculation is not a negative terminology, much as within the context which the president spoke, it can be deemed, or it cannot. That's what I meant as speculation, in the sense that here's the president who's got his advisors or lieutenants within the economy, in the person of the finance minister and the central bank governor. And I've told you that, look, in all the synchronization of communications and efforts that have been happening, you could see that most often than not, the executive arm of government in most governments globally are always at loggerheads with the treasury, the man with the purse, because they want to spend. They have the high appetite to spend because they have manifestos to respond to. Whereas you have the finance minister who wants to control the market. Or if he's also a spend rate, then you have the central bank governor who wants to tighten, controls. But this time around, you have all three of them trying to manage the situation. What it does is that it puts a certain level of confidence into the economy, right? When you talk about speculation, trading or currency issues are on speculation. Why do people go on the trading floor, right? To speculate, to trade, and to look at the issues that are happening, right? Years before, in the first tenure of Donald Trump, his tweets were used as speculative elements as far as the US dollar is concerned. But that's not to say that's what President Mahama did. He went on a responsible communication tangent to say this is the openness of the market. He, in essence, is a responsible communication trying to curb irresponsible speculation, if you put it that way. But a lot of effort has come into place. I've said, time without number, that if you look at the efforts that have been going in, right from the vetting of the finance minister, there's been real confidence. Mind you, we inherited a very overheated economy, right, where all the dashboards of inflation, of currency losses, of profitability of the central bank and everything went south. So you needed to stabilize that. You had a finance minister, we had a domestic debt exchange program, a harrowing one at that. We come in, we make real commitments to say, look, we are going to engage our external debtors, we're engaging our internal debtors, and this is what we're going to do. Even amidst energy crisis, at the time we're taking over, an IMF, a joint World Bank IMF report, a news institution, dated 2024, very recent, if you put it that way, our energy debt was 1.7% to GDP before we took over. So you look at all of these issues happening, and then you have a president, a finance minister, and a central bank governor stepping in to put all of this in place. And if you say nothing is happening, then I don't know what else you want to see.
So that was okay, Land.
We also spoke about the gold board program. People say, okay, well, nothing has been traded. When you look at markets make projections and long-term measures. The gold board, as I said, compared to very sporadic issues and sprinkler of investment issues that we may make to say, okay, we are shoring up reserves, we are securing reserves. The gold board has got longevity because it has a board. It's backed by law, legislation. So investors are going to sit back and say, okay, well, here is a sustainable measure to currency stability. What it means is that the cedi is going to be healthy for a very long time. Can we come back to the market? Right. We even inherited a market at the time where there was no domestic appetite because of the domestic debt exchange program. At a time where blue chip investments such as pensions were touched in this country. This is how bad it was. So if we come in and we're bringing in stability, right, signaling and telling the people that, look, hey, it's happy days now. We're not there yet, but this is what we are putting in place. Internal controls. Government has said that, look, expenditure, let's tighten it. I'm not going to have a balloon government. what else do you want a government to do? There's not even financial headroom to do anything. So if you say nothing has been done, well, the good people of Ghana are feeling it. They know. He who feels it knows it right.
So I want you to explain, for instance, to that 4-year-old
Yeah.
about exactly what you're doing. I know you talk about tightening the system, and that was a point that the president made earlier when he indeed commended the governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Siama, about some of the things that he believed the bank was doing. And I will just give a quote here. He said, careful monetary tightening, which you just mentioned, improved foreign exchange liquidity, and a better synchronization of fiscal and monetary policy frameworks. These are the ones accounting for it. How do you explain to somebody like Dr. George Domfe, who thinks that what we're seeing now, it's rather artificial?
Look, we could have come in as a government and said, look, can we re-engage our domestic debt exchange program, right? The debts that we've come to meet, external debts, and say we're not going to pay because we don't have money to pay all of that. But having to do all of that is part of what? Developing the economy. And I said that, look, the blueprint to any government is its budget. What is on the budget? The market sees it and understands the direction of the government. So this is all in practical terms. So I don't know what we are missing here or what else of a magic wand that anyone would want to see and say, okay, well, this is what is happening. We could have come in and say, okay, well, can we leave inflation at this level? We can't tighten it. We need to spend, among other issues. If we did all of this, would the currency be where it is now? Would there be an economy for us to run? So these are the fundamental questions we need to. So there were options to take.
In the nutshell, before I come to Professor Boedi, what you're saying is that whatever is happening, there's signs to back it, and so we should expect that it will be sustained.
If there's no signs to back it, I mean, you see, when you say something is artificial, right? When you see sprinklers, you all understand market speculation, we all understand currency markets and the zigzag approaches. There've been constant stability. Does it reflect any artificial measure? If there was artificial measure, would the market have that confidence? I've had friends who receive Forex in earnings tell me that they've had 30% haircut. 30% haircut, jokingly, but that's the reality. And I tell them, well, but you've enjoyed it for a very long time. They say they agree. Thanks to the currency stability. So if investors are beginning to call and say, look, where is this going? They are not even getting the speculation because they see real long-term stability. So you have some businessmen even calling government officials to ask, where are you guys taking the currency to? So if the market doesn't believe...
So that's the reason the president decided, okay, let's keep it at 10 to 12.
It's not about...
we can
no, we are not
take it down
artificially.
further.
It's demand and supply that's dealing with it. That backed by the prudent measures taken by the government, i.e. the central bank, the finance minister, and the presidency.
Let me get this quick clarity
executive.
from you before I go to Professor Boedi. What you're saying is that although the president told us earlier that the real value is between 10 and 12, there's still a possibility that this could go down depending on the market demands, like you just said.
No, what I said is the government has left it to the free flow and fall.
So there's a possibility it could go down further?
I'm not saying there's a possibility for it to go down. Demand and supply of the market would respond to the positive progress that the president and his team are injecting into
Let me find out from you, Professor Boedi. We've just had a bit of flesh to whatever it is that is happening. Are you convinced that indeed these are scientific stuff that could keep the cedi getting strengthened over and again over a long period of time?
Well, I should not be convinced. Rather, the market should be convinced. And the population must be convinced. Yeah. I may understand some of the numbers, but the point is that when someone is making statements, you need to put certain things into consideration. Who is that person speaking or talking? Why is he making those pronouncements? And who happen to be those who are hearing? Three important things must be considered when someone speaks. At what point? When you mount a political platform, you speak. Some are not careful, you speak and say certain things. Who are the audience? Would they understand what they are talking about? And these are the things that I've said. That in the Forex market, speculations are allowed to some extent. But when you speculate, there are potential benefits, there are potential risks that you inherit. And if you make such comments without strong fundamentals in the country, it will come back and haunt you. I've heard people who have said from the NDC camp that this administration, because of what they have done so well in terms of cedi stabilization.
in
Others
just
have-
6 months?
Well, 6 months. Others have said, well, we don't think the government has done so well. Rather, the past events could have effect on what we are enjoying at the moment. These are two different schools of thought. The point is that if we allow this administration to take full credit, which for me, if they are allowed to do that, that's fine. When it takes a node dive or something happening with the same administration, be willing to be tagged, So when we play, use economy, talk about political issues, and we bring those things into an economic, discussions, we have a problem. In fact, every government, when we inherit administration, you have the assets, you have the liabilities as well. You don't take all the credit. But there's times you need to go back and find out within 6 months. I have been looking for tangible policies churned out by this administration. That is why we are enjoying the stability of the city.
You haven't seen that?
Well, I'm saying I am here to see major government policies by this administration.
You heard
within
Professor
the period-
Khalid talk about the gold board. We've also heard, for instance, that, okay, that may not, in terms of the gold and cocoa doing well on the international market, that may not necessarily be as a result of what they're doing, but at least he's talked about the gold board and talked about the relationship between the Bank of Ghana, for instance, and the government, and the fact that they seem to have one direction towards stabilizing the economy. You don't think that's
Very
good
good.
enough?
Remember the BOG, who are in charge, the governor in charge of monetary policies of this administration, had come out. If you go Ghana Web, I can give you the date. When he was asked what things that have contributed to the cedi appreciation, he mentioned about 3 key factors. And if you consider all those factors I'm going to talk about, most of them are external factors. He made mention of the fact that the cedi resurgence has been as a result of the gold. And what we do as a country, we only control quantity. Prices are determined externally. So today, we are enjoying, cruising. Tomorrow, if we have a drop in the price of gold and you are not producing enough quantity, what happens? 2, he mentioned the injection of, I think, 490 something from IMF coming to the country. And when you see such funds, they are not in cedis, of course. You have some currency.
We are aware that the Bank of Ghana, for instance, injected some monies, dollars, into the economy.
Yeah.
What's the point you're making in summary?
Yeah.
So I go to the others.
Yeah, so on several fronts and things I've talked about over the period, that it's good, we are enjoying the stability of the city, but you cannot outsource your gains only to external factors. We need to see local things that have been done by this administration. Yes, we talk for the gold board. They are not only to regular gold production. So they are not only to export gold, but there are certain parts of activities that they have to do in our country.
Okay, I'll come back to you, but I want to get Dr. George Domfe, if you're still on for us. I just want to understand, I'm sure you heard Professor Khalid there giving you the reasons we are seeing that the appreciation of the Ghana cedi. I believe perhaps you have some reasons now, and I don't know whether you're still standing by your earlier thought that you think this is artificial, having been provided with some flesh, as it were.
My dear sister, let me thank you very much, and let me thank the good professor for his response. But I don't share the opinion without the for so many reasons. As a student of monetary economics, I know the fact that would help local currencies to stay strong. I know those very well, and those that he mentioned, I think I was struggling to see whether indeed that is the reason why cedi has become so stronger. We shouldn't forget that since 2000, Ghana has been practicing what we call managed floating exchange rate system since 2007. And what the country has been doing is that demand and supply factors for foreign currency would always determine the value of the local currency, which is cedi. But as and when the cedi is in trouble, Bank of Ghana will periodically intervene to supply.
So,
and anytime the bank intervenes, the bank intervention is what is called artificial. Any student of monetary will tell you, bank intervene is that the market forces are not working.
Doc, what about? Forgive me for interrupting, but what about?
Hello. Would you need to land?
Okay, please land.
Oh, please allow me. So I'm telling Professor, as a student of monetary economics, anytime there is an excessive or intervention from the bank to protect the cedi, especially at the time when US dollar is having is been depreciating all major foreign currencies, especially at when commodity price, gold, coal have fallen up and the inputs are so high, especially at this time when government is paying contractors, especially at this time government is not paying statutory. And for that, the demand has gone down, and the demand for foreign currencies has gone down. And Bank of Ghana, in a single month, April, supplied to the second forest $490 million US. They did up there. May they tell the market and I supply $125 million US. And so, because of the USD has become stronger, and you go to the street to celebrate it, I wouldn't have.
So, Doc,
because you see, this thing, that's what I wanted to say. Would you also let me make this point and then you can? This
if you could wrap up.
This has happened before, you know? Yeah, so let me wrap. This has happened before. When Nana Akufo-Addo, I told you that during his first, in this whole war with the management of cedi depreciated accumulatively about 26%, and that's the one of the best performance. But during his second term, it was a problem, especially the year 2020.
So let me come in here. I'm sorry, Doc, let me come in here.
Can you allow me to on this?
I think I've allowed you to make a lot of points, so please let me come in here. There are those, for instance, who are watching us, who are commenting, feeling that they feel that you're playing politics with this whole idea. Because, for instance, if you talk about the gold board, the argument is that the government has been able to stop the illegal smuggling of gold, either from big or small or medium-sized enterprises or those involved in, or even individuals. And therefore, the government is now able to account for how much gold is getting out of the country, and the country is not losing as much as perhaps previously when, you know, Ghana didn't even have the correct record of how much gold got out of the country. And then there's also that conversation about the synchronization of these institutions, i.e. the Bank of Ghana. You're also looking at the government itself, including the finance ministry, working together, having the attention that we want to be able to stabilize the cedi and to ensure that the economy is in good health. You do not think that these are realistic things enough supporting the cedi, in as much as there is that admission that, yes, the Bank of Ghana has injected some dollars into the economy?
I think my point, like, what is important about this? People listening to me, I want them to tell me that Ghana did not supply for but Ghana did not supply again 425 million in May. I want them to tell me whether or not government is spending. I wanted to tell me whether government has paid contractors, whether government has paid funds. That's the biggest spend in every economy. And government is not doing this. Demand is low. You know, I mean, you had allowed me. The other one I was trying to point interject. I struggle. I mean, allow me. And that what we are seeing, we have seen it in the first month of December. The first month of December. The first month of the year 2022, January 2022. $1 was going for cedi 20 pesos. Okay, before Ukrainian thing and all those things hit Ghana, we had total of 9.9. Bank of Ghana started supplying too much into the market into the city. But August, when the was almost running out of reserves, we happened to city. By October, at the forest market, cedi was outside the interbank exchange rate market. Cedi was going for nearly 70s.
So in summary, the point you're making is, so I can get that quick thought from Professor Kaufman before we move to the other side. Okay.
I don't like that.
I'm sorry, Doc. I'm getting feedback that your sound is not that good. So we are perhaps going to call you on the phone. But whilst we try to do that, and please don't forget your train of thought, we'll come back to you for you to land on your point. But I want to come to you, Professor Kaufman, on really the sustainability of the strengthening of the cedi against the dollar. I just want to get your thought. Earlier, you didn't seem to have the idea that indeed there were some policies backing whatever is happening. We've had Dr. Khalid, Professor Khalid, as well as Professor Boedi there, giving us a bit more of context. Where do you stand on how sustainable you believe these ideas are?
The ultimate assessment can only be made by you, the experts in Ghana, who know exactly the details, but ultimately will be also made by all the players in the market and the investors. And they are, as an economist with gray hair, so I'm not young anymore, who have seen a lot, let me make 3 brief points from an economist standpoint globally, but I think it applies here in Ghana. One, we need to be very careful at all times about premature exuberance or premature declarations of victory, either regarding having regained full investor confidence or about the stability of the cedi, the cedi so far. This is very early days. There's been a lot of achievements, but we cannot. I think there is no compelling evidence that the full investor confidence has been regained. Otherwise, we would not have the 10-year bond yield at close to 30%. That's why I mentioned it before. Second point, unless the central bank is going to intervene, which I have no idea about it, but let's assume it won't in the very near future. This is an economist's point. The probability of the cedi soon going below 10 is roughly the same as it is going back up. It's a random walk. And that leads to the third point. We need to understand that there are 2 very different types of forces at play here. One are the external forces, which is like the price of gold, the price of cocoa, which there is no control by anybody in Ghana, obviously, and they can go in either direction in the coming months, and depending on that will affect the cedi one way or the other. And then there are the internal forces, the internal drivers, which are very much under the control of all of you and of the leadership of Ghana. The monetary and fiscal policy, which results in inflation. So there I have 2 questions to all of you and to the other panelists, because you are in policy making and you know this better. Now, ambition number 1, can Ghana really get to a budget balance in the medium term and to a target of 5%, no more than 4 or 5% inflation a year, which has rarely, if ever, been achieved. I come from Chile, from South America, and we have done it. We have had other issues, but it took a long time, but eventually it's done, and it's been stability for forever. Nowadays, the 30-day and 1 year yield on bonds in Chile is about 5.5%, and the 10-year yield is 5.75. So there's no inverted yield curve. It's the same, and that's what they expect. And the second, let me tell you, the second ambition.
And Prof, if you could be wrapping up for us so we can move on to the next and then wrap up the conversation for tonight.
Allow me, please, because this is very important. It has to be complemented by the second ambition to continue to implement the structural and governance reform, including stopping the smuggling, but also implementing the anti-monopoly law, the anti-corruption, anti-state capture, the tax system that needs to revamp, and so on. That has to come together. If the evidence is out there that all this is being done, of course one can bank and predict stability and growth for Ghana in the future. But if there is again a reversal or the implementation doesn't take place, there's going to be another episode like there have been quite a few in the past.
So the understanding I'm getting from what you're saying is that you think a lot of the things, and that's my next question, and I'll ask the rest of the panel members here the same question. The understanding I'm getting is that you feel that perhaps a lot of the gains you are making are coming as a result of external factors like the price of cocoa, the price of gold, and a few others, and you're wondering how we are generating revenue for sustainability. Perhaps let me remind you that the government just last week brought in that 1 Ghana cedi on fuel, on every liter of fuel that Ghanaians would buy, just to save the energy sector from collapsing. And also we've seen that inflation has dropped from 21% in April to now 18.4%. Do you think that these are good enough in terms of generating the amount of money we need to support whatever is happening now? Just very briefly before I come to the rest of the panel members, Prof. Okay, so we'll have to get back to Prof.
I've played an important role. The government, the new administration, the government, and everybody knows that, have been making very significant efforts. The question is whether not only they can be sustained, but they can be expanded and redoubled to the structural and governance issues that I also discussed, so that in 6 months and in a year, then there is a complete restoration of this confidence and stability, but we are not there yet.
Let me ask you, and I'm coming to you, Dr. Domfo, because I think I caught you earlier, and then I'll come to the rest of the panel members in studio. You wanted to land, and he rejoins us via phone, actually. You wanted to land on the point you were making earlier, and I'll be grateful if you could do it a bit quickly so we're able to move on. Other panel members are also able to have their bite as well. And also to the question I just asked Professor Daniel Kaufman. Please go ahead.
Very much for bringing me back, because I wasn't so much happy when you intervened. I don't like if others are saying I'm doing politics, I don't get them. I'm using figures. I'm trying to say that in 2022, when we went into similar situation, and Ken Oforiatta and the then governor pumped in so much, even though around October, cedi was going almost 15 cities. By the end of December, interbank exchange rate had dropped to 8%. It dropped. So what we are saying is not as if we haven't seen it before. 2022, we saw it. It dropped. But 2024, what happened? It went back again because it was, an intervention from the BOG. The intervention will depend on how much more money you have as reserves to supply. Can Bank of Ghana supply over 400 million every month? That is the question we should be asking, and that is not sustainable. That is not sustainable. And so if somebody says that it's because of the tight monetary policy measures, that is a lie. Because Ken Oforiatta and the old governor, before the onset of the crisis, policy rate was 13.5. They moved it to 29% before it dropped to 27. And so if the new governor has moved it from 27 to 28, what is so special about this?
So let me ask you this. Let me ask you this question before I come to Professor Khalid.
The person who moved it from 13 0.5 to 29 hasn't done anything. But the one who came to meet it at 27 has moved it to 28, and he's doing so well with the monetary. We need to be very careful in this country and get serious.
So what about...
So that's the point I was trying to make.
Okay, so now the second question, which I asked Professor Kaufman, and then I'll come to you, Professor Khalid, to respond.
The second question,
which is that...
The second question is the reason why NDC government today is injecting more dollars. In fact, I was wondering what monetary policy measure is that? At the time when people are not demanding dollars and foreign currency, that is the time we are pumping so much into the system.
Dr. Donfe, forgive me. No, the question I asked was, Professor Kaufman talked about the fact that we need to also look at our revenue mobilization. And I said that so far, we had the government introducing the 1 Ghana cedi on every liter of fuel that we buy, which is a way of generating money, especially for the energy sector, as well as a few other domestic things being done. And I'm asking you, because you're saying that whatever is happening is artificial, so now this is a way of generating money. What do you think about that? And if you could say that very briefly, because I need to come to the rest of the panel members. Doc.
I'm saying that they wanted to create that situation where cedi will pick up that strength, dollar will go down, fuel prices will come down, so they can introduce that tax that they just introduced. The whole whatever they did was to force this cedi strength up, the dollar down, because it's very significant when it comes to pricing of petroleum products. And so they did this artificially. Let me bring the dollar down so fuel prices will come down. Once fuel prices come down, I can then smuggle in, the 1 cedi tax of a liter of fuel. That is exactly why they did this. And they be very smart about it.
All right, so let me get a response. Let me get a response from Professor Khalid, if you would allow that. Prof, I think there have been a lot of things that have been said. How do you respond to these?
And I want to first of all start with Professor Hoffman. I mean, Professor Hoffman spoke in such a manner as though everything was held constant. But what the context, and it's good that he admits that he's not an expert on Ghana, but follows Ghana keenly. In reality, I mean, let's take it that he was part of an IMF mission that came to Ghana post-elections. What his report be? His report would stem from the fact that something happened previously, which was the economy before, the domestic debt exchange program, central bank posting losses, right? At the time, we were telling ourselves that we had turned a corner when we were already in an overheated economy. So if we're an inheritor, or it's a government within a developing country, emerging market, is inherited such baggage, right? I think that contextualization of the questions within which he acts as a former IMF wank would have to bring that into context. But he spoke out of context without bringing all of this in, which this government is in trying to stabilize. Now, Dr. Bonfe made mention of the fact of spending. If a government goes to parliament and presents a budget, the market picks it up because you've made appropriations, you've made allocations that X is going to be spent on the economy. So the government and planners or market planners start to make decisions based on that paper spending that has already been done. So when you say a government has not spent, I don't know what that means. Also, you've gone ahead to service domestic debt exchange programs, right? Our blue chip, investments such as pensions that has been touched, external debtors has been engaged. And now I dovetail into the very germane question you asked on petroleum issues. When President Mahama came in, there was what was known as the nuisance taxes. What happened? He made a pledge, he took them out. Now, again, not out of context, what happened to ESLA? We met virtually nothing. It was depleted. What happened to the sinking fund, which was more of an insurance fund measure? It was depleted. So if there was nothing at all, which has been the creation of Mahama 1 or JM1 to fix all of this, and you come to meet an empty COFEX, it is only right to see how you could engage that. Right? Would you term the 1 cedi levy on petroleum products a nuisance tax? Obviously not, because you're not targeted at the poor in double taxation, as was seen in e-levy, among other issues. I could see the equalization of it. We are not admitting. It is difficult times, which is why we're calling on all stakeholders to say this is what it is. At a time, right, and I'm referring to an IMF, a Briniwu's institution report, right, not dated 2012, dated 2024, just only recent. We were doing 1.7% of GDP, right,
And if you
when it
wrap
comes
up and I'll
to
get the
debt
final word as
accumulation,
well.
when it comes to debts within the energy sector. So how do we service this? Now, what we are failing to realize what we're failing to realize is that the kind of commitment being made, even to this form of taxation, which you and I are all going to be a part of, in actually trying to get, is that it injects some level of confidence again into the economy, because there is a certain level of stability, right, that we are going to service these loans. New investments within the energy sector is going to re-emerge. And thankfully, one thing you realize is that President Mahama has always been in the forefront of fighting, energy sustainability issues within this country. When
If you
things
could
so
wrap up
happen,
for me,
among
so I
other
can get-
issues,
yes.
yeah, I'm going to give that chance. So, and luckily, again, we have an energy minister who has seen it all. At the time of the power crisis, he was at the forefront. So it's more like a deja vu. It's not uncharted waters. The only thing as citizens that we need to call is how we can police this tax to see how we can use it to actually erode this energy debt and bring us to stability and saturation levels. When that is done, the President Mahama, we know, would call the stakeholders together and say, look, this is where we've gotten to rate. We can as well get rid of it.
So in the nutshell, you think that the country is on the right track?
Well, the people of Ghana are to answer this question.
And
I am trying to help for them to understand that this is what it is, but I leave it to them. Right? The proof of the pudding is in the eating.
And I will come to you, Professor Isaac Boadi, but let me just read about 3 comments from you. A number of you have sent us so many of your comments expressing your thoughts. Samuel Tay says, if government hasn't paid contractors, how and why are they on site? That too is artificial, Abi. And then there is, if you export, saying that it's better to, as in utilize the money we get from our export of gold than to burn it. Let me just get your final thought in about 30 seconds.
Wow. Yeah, good. Because I wanted to respond to some of the issues raised earlier on. But then for my good professor who said they didn't meet anything in the press. And for me, it's worrying because we've seen the government inherited goodies as well as the other luggages as well.
Specific to some ports.
Okay, okay. So I'm sure we can talk about the positive ones. But the question that you asked today, is the government on track? Let me be simple here. That the government has made some progress in stabilizing some key microeconomic indicators. For instance, inflation declining, cedi stability, that should suggest something in terms of microeconomic indicators. Then we have fuel pricing going up and that of transportation fare, suggesting that there's a pressure that's also been
Remember
lowered.
that fuel price
I'll come to that.
prices have gone down
Yeah.
until the 1 Ghana cedi.
Yes, I'll come to that. Then issue of debt reduction as a result of cedi appreciation. So I'm looking at these gains are temporal. They're short terms. But you see, structural challenges remain.
Yeah.
Interest rates on a high side. What are you doing? You stifle businesses and access to credit. We have issues on power sector debt and outages. You rather affect industrialization.
So in the nutshell, what do you expect the government to do in like 15 seconds? I guess you already did the 30 seconds.
Well,
so I'm giving you extra 15 seconds. If you could wrap up.
I am saying that we've seen some visible gains over a period of time. These issues or the benefit that we are enjoying as a result of external factors. We want to see domestic policies that you can talk about. For instance, the 24-hour economy, which happens to be the game changer. It's in the room. What is happening? And we want domestic policies to be followed.
Thank
because
you.
these are structural challenges.
Thank you.
Not to say, we're not celebrating, we are communicating. the gains, but not celebration. So when we say celebration, there's a vast difference between celebrating and communicating. So we're communicating and keeping the market in
We'll
check.
have to end it here. Thank you very much, Sharif Mahmood Khalid, Associate Professor of Accounting and Finance and Economic Advisor to the Vice President. Thank you very much for joining us on Agenda tonight. Also, Professor Isaac Bwedi, Dean of the Faculty of Accounting and Finance at the UPSA. Prof, you're grateful you were able to join us in studio tonight. We've also had with us Professor Daniel Kaufman, former director at the World Bank and also visiting scholar at Harvard. Thank you as well for making time to join us via video call. And of course, Dr. George Dunford, development economist, for also joining us. We're sorry we couldn't come back to both of you via video call for your final thoughts. My name is Beatrice. Thank you very much for joining us on Agenda tonight. Join us again next week. Have a good evening.